So to get this started, I'd like to talk specifically about two general areas. One of them is obviously the reuse of content, the ability to effectively reuse content from a single source of truth, in this case an NISOSTS or ISOSTS XML input file. And the other area is the idea of options. Continuing on from accessibility in the previous session, the idea that you can give your end users options. So in this case, what you can see is in the Typefi user interface that we've got several workflows that are going to help us produce PDF, HTML, and EPUB from an XML file. So let's go a little bit deeper into the details of that. Let's first take a look at the workflow, the one designated with a little rocket ship with XML to PDF, because PDF is still the #1 format for the distribution of content at this time. And when we're looking at that workflow, you can see in Typefi a workflow is built up of several modular actions. So that can be put together in different ways to produce ultimately a different kind of output, or using different kind of transforms. So what we can see here is that the first action is called import ISOSTS, takes an ISO or ISOSTS XML file, and is transformed to content XML or .cxml, as you can see here, which is an intermediary format that Typefi has developed over the years to work well with InDesign and other formats, which we'll get into a little bit more later. We've got some conditions here that allow us to control for various outputs what we do and do not want to have. So we can control content that we only want to see in the PDF and not in the EPUB, and vice versa, or things that we only want to see in the HTML. So we can control that using conditions. And then we start with a create InDesign document action using an InDesign template that will take that content XML and lay out the pages. And then we're exporting to PDF, and ultimately we're modifying that PDF to improve its accessibility. So that's the thought. That's what's happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the Run button, and I'm going to choose an input file. In this case, that is going to be a NISOSTS file. And we click the Run button. And it starts, Typefi starts working through the steps in the action. So the first step is transforming the NISOSTS XML into content XML. Subsequently, that content XML is going to be fed into InDesign, which is still at this time in the top 90% of applications used worldwide for the creation of content. And while that happens, soon we'll see InDesign come to the front of our screen, and we will actually see the composition start. So now the Typefi composition engine is taking that content XML and is going to be placing it on the page and processing it. So right now it's starting with the cover, and as more content gets put in, we will see it continuing to generate pages. This will take a couple of minutes. So now that we're here, we might as well take a short moment to talk about the fact that Typefi has chosen to standardize around InDesign when it comes to the composition of pages. Like I said previously, InDesign is currently among the top 90% of content production applications out there in the world, and it has a huge following. It's also quite easy to find InDesign experts. There's literally thousands of experts out there that use InDesign on a regular basis. So that means that the learning curve for working with Typefi is also greatly reduced. Another great benefit of InDesign and why we chose to use it is its scriptability. So on this page, we can see that there's actually math, and this math is live MathML. So we're taking the MathML that's part of the NISOSTS XML, we're placing it on the page, and an InDesign JavaScript is taking that MathML and feeding it through an InDesign tool called MathTools that creates the math on the page. And that's something that is one of the big benefits of using InDesign. So slowly, as you're seeing, you saw some graphics, you're now seeing tables being laid out on the page, and soon we're going to reach the end of this composition. So then the next step in the process is going to take place, which is taking this InDesign file and exporting a PDF from it, and then taking that PDF and making some changes to it so that it is more accessible than it was before. So that's the step that we're currently at, and in a moment we can go to the jobs view. So I'm already going to switch to the browser and navigate to the jobs view in Typefi, where we can see the history of jobs that were run successfully. This one is going to be finished soon. So as soon as it's finished, we can go ahead and look into the job folder, where we're going to see that all of the input files and output files that were produced as part of this job are available to the customer and can be downloaded and worked with. So as you can see here, all of the files are available, including the InDesign file and a PDF file that was generated from this. So I'm going to quickly open up that PDF file. In this case, it's going to open up in the browser, and I think that's just fine. And you have the PDF. It has clickable hyperlinks. It has a table of contents that takes you from immediately takes you to a page. There's alternative text in here because the long description tag in the XML is automatically processed in the Typefi workflow and is added to images, and we can see our MathML that is fully text-based, ready for other formats like HTML, which are getting better and better at rendering MathML natively. So that's that. Now, what I want to do, because we only have a couple, 10 minutes or so, is I want to quickly kick off, go back to the workflows, and I quickly want to kick off another workflow, in this case the XML to Epub workflow, which when we look at the details of that workflow is similar to our PDF, except that we've got a different transform that's being applied, and we also have a different InDesign template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the run button here, and again, we are going to have the same NISO.xml file that was used to generate the PDF, and that's going to run the Epub file. So this is again being handed off to InDesign, first transformed to Content XML, and then in a moment it's going to be handed off to InDesign to be processed. Now, we've already seen that with the PDF, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in watching this run through. I just want to see that being kicked off. Now, let's switch to one of the other workflows, and that is the generation of HTML, again from that same file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this workflow that you can see is much shorter than the other ones. This one also converts from ISO STS to Content XML and then generates an HTML file from that. So let's click Run. Let's choose, again, our input file, and let's get some HTML generation going. So here, because this is an XML to essentially another kind of XML, because that's what HTML is, this is going to be pretty quick. So now that the job is finished, let's go ahead and go into the job file and download our HTML file. And let's actually open that up in the browser. So this is as plain HTML as it can be. And the purpose of this is not to look pretty, because we don't know yet what you may want. HTML is a clear separation. It is like XML. It doesn't have any visual representation. That is what the CSS takes care of. So this is just HTML. But the beauty of this, the links are there. Some basic structure in the form of heading levels are there. The MathML is being inserted into the HTML. And we're seeing some basic heading levels. The beautiful thing about this is it can be molded to whatever kind of HTML you want. The main thing takeaway for this is we can produce HTML out of the same input file easy and quickly. Right. So the last thing that I want to end with is actually a different kind of transform altogether. We can take the NISO XML and actually produce a docx file from it. So what you can see here, I'll switch to a different tab, is a workflow that is slightly different. It still starts with import ISO STS because that's the first stepping stone, but then there are some other actions in here that export to docx, but also that modify the docx file to make it look the way that ISO wanted when they commissioned this work. So what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to run this file, again taking the same input XML file that was preloaded into this workflow, and it converted and transformed into a docx file. So I'm going to download that file right now and open it up in Microsoft Word. It's going to open up in protected view because that's what Microsoft Office does with everything that is downloaded from a browser. But I'm just going to enable editing because I trust the source. And just to show you that this is a Word file that was produced from an XML file, and that has things like clickable hyperlinks, tables of content, lists that are actual automatic lists. So you can go enter and it will actually produce a new, in this case, bulleted list, but it works with the numbers as well. And it has headers and footers, as you can see. And I think one of the coolest part of this entire work is that the MathML, again, that the power of that MathML, these are fully editable in Microsoft Native's equation editor. So we've taken the MathML and transformed them in Microsoft Open XML editor, and they can now be edited directly in Word. Thank you for your time, and let's open up the floor to questions.